desk like a profesh. I'm like eating breakfast, you know how it is. It's very professional, yeah. So it might be that because someone needs to be the host. Okay, Adam has entered the waiting room. Okay, I think I can admit you both. So let me get situated, and I will add you both to the meeting. So give me just a second. Okay, cool. All right, bye. Okay. 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 Let's see, waiting room. Admit.
Should we mute? Well, I mean, like, I feel like I don't want any background chatter on my side.
That's best practice. Yeah, if you guys mute until it's your turn to talk, and then just stay live on the camera.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
All right.
And we'll just give it to one after Ren, and then
one after. Okay.
let people in because they.
Sweet. All right. This is an awkward, like.
Right.
It's like the elevator version of being on Zoom. Like, you're in an elevator. Should we talk? Should we not?
Yeah, it's Zoom purgatory, right? It's like I don't want to say anything to you. Ready?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
I'm gonna start admitting, and you start talking.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay. Okay, and we're waiting to join. Okay. All right, go ahead, Terry.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everybody. This is a panel brought to you sort of this week by Sustainable Building Week, which is a 2-week series of events that are taking place this year virtually. My name's Terry Campbell. I'm one of the co-founders. And as you can see from the schedule on the screen, we have a really robust, diverse set of events going on this week and all of next week. The majority of them are free. And there are some that can apply for continuing education credits. So feel free to take a look at the website, sustainablebuildingweek.org/events, and you can kind of register and see what else we have going on. The next slide covers, this is our sort of top level sponsors for this year. It's a great, again, diverse group of architecture firms, consulting firms, material suppliers, contractors, engineering firms. And we really couldn't do this. We couldn't have these events without them. So next slide, please. And then the way Sustainable Building Week works is it's a grassroots effort where we work with, in the past, it started in Portland, Oregon. So we worked with local professional organizations who were already hosting events, and we just asked them to host events during the same week in October and make it about sustainable design, construction, green building, product transparency, equity, all issues related to building better buildings and better communities. And so we are really happy after 3 years to continue to grow our list of collaborating organizations. And this is who we collaborated with this year to bring this together. So yeah, I'm going to pass it back to Ren, and I hope you have a good session this morning and check out some other events. Have a good day.
Thank you, Terry. So today we are talking about implementing material transparency we're having a conversation with a couple contractors. So thanks to Sustainable Building Week for sort of hosting us. This event is brought to you by MfT. It's a group called Manufacturers for Transparency. It's a sort of support group for manufacturers who are interested in taking on material transparency and want a little help or just support in that effort. And so we are going to be chatting about how this happens in the field, because frequently contractors are the ones who have to, well, not frequently, you always are the ones that have to make it actually happen. And so we want to talk about how designers and architects should think about that, what's happening sort of on the ground in the field, and how we can keep this movement going. So we have some great panelists today. We have Emily with GCI General Contractors out of the Bay Area, Josh with Perlo Construction from here in Portland, and Adam with Walsh Construction, also here in Portland. So we are gonna get right to it and start with our friend Emily. Emily, I will be your happy slide advancer, so just let me know when you want to advance, and I got you.
Thank you. Good morning. So I am here to talk about sort of how and when we as contractors get involved in material selection. Just a little more introduction. Ren said I'm the sustainability manager at GCI General Contractors. We're a commercial general contractor in the Bay Area and do a lot of tenant improvement work. I participate in a number of working groups and outside activities with different industry members. And I think that the influence that contractors have over materials is a kind of a black box. It comes up a lot. And so I'm here to shed some light on that today and hopefully inspire you to think about places where there might be opportunities to advocate whatever your role on the project team is, whether you are the contractor or you want to make asks of your contractor.
Awesome.
So, slide, please.
Heck yeah. Thanks, Emily. And before we get started, again, can you tell us a little bit about, like for like 30 seconds, like your general bio and again, what it is that you do for GCI?
Sure. So I'm the sustainability manager at GCI. So in charge of our sustainability goals and execution of them. Do quite a few lead projects, an LBC project here and there. I'm also a member of the lead materials and resources technical advisory group, and active with several other groups like our sustainable construction leaders, Bay Area sustainable construction leaders, and so advocating for net zero impact construction in a lot of different ways.
Awesome. All right, let's do it.
All right, so contractors, when the project gets handed to the contractor is really where the rubber meets the road. I'll go to our next slide already. Contractors are an important link. We have sight lines into product negotiations and procurement. We are on site, seeing what's actually being brought into the job site. We have decision-making power over general spec categories, substitutions, value engineering. We'll talk about that in another slide or two. And then we're often the ones that are making the asks for documentation for LEED and LBC and other programs. And so having those conversations with subcontractors and potentially manufacturers. Next slide, please. We are also directly at risk. And so this is personal. Contractors are excuse me?
You froze for just a second. So let's, definitely emphasize this point because it's really important. You guys really are on the front lines.
Yeah, let's go on here. Okay, well, so I think I'm live, good, yeah. So if you're attending Sustainable Design Week, I imagine that you have, some knowledge that a lot of the chemicals that go into common building products are pretty questionable, linked to cancer, to endocrine issues, fertility issues, asthma, all sorts of things. Look at this poor man here with all these targets all over his body. It's, our employees, our subcontractors that are directly exposed when we're opening up packaging, that initial off-gassing is happening, or when there's, cutting happening and dust, vapors, fumes flying around to space. And so in preparing for this presentation, I came across a research study which said that a carpenter, as an example, is exposed up to 13 times a day to hazardous chemicals. So imagine a superintendent who's on a job site with the carpenter installing the millwork, potentially somewhere else on that floor, there is flooring being installed, there is painting happening. So the exposure really is pretty real. Next slide, please. So this one I'm going to skip over pretty fast, just given the interest of time. The problem is obviously that chemicals don't stay put inside the products that they're in. These are some of the bigger offenders in construction. And if you go to sixclasses.org, it's a really good resource for what some of these chemicals of concern are and what their impacts potentially are to human health. So next slide, please. So the solution should be simple, right? Just choose healthier materials, but the lack of disclosure and the lack of research around health impacts means that we don't have the data that we need to understand what's healthier or to make better choices. So how do we work on that? Myself, along with some other contractors, have been coming up with a framework to move towards healthy materials. And so it starts with an internal commitment, and then education, and initially that internal education within your company, doing the product research, asking questions, reading labels, and then setting goals around product categories or by project. So taking a step on every project to improve in one product category is meaningful and will help us move the market. It doesn't have to be a complete sweeping ban of 13 different things on a project. There are smaller steps that can be taken every day on every project. And then to be an advocate is the last piece. So that's doing education externally and engaging your clients, engaging your subcontractors, engaging manufacturers. So who is working on this? Next slide, sorry.
You're good.
There are a few different initiatives underway. Sustainable Construction Leaders is a group of general contractors under Building Green, and it's a sister group to the Sustainable Design Leaders that's been meeting for several years now. And we're working on a contractor's commitment, which has best practice guidance at a good, better, best sort of level of activity you can engage in different buckets. So carbon, water, energy efficiency, and materials is a piece of that. And so there's a framework there for getting started and then getting your company more involved. Also with the International Living Futures Institute, the Closing the Transparency Loop initiative. Likely many of you are familiar with the LP50, the Living Product 50, which was a manufacturer letter that went out to industry, responded. In that case, it was designers that responded. And so we are working on a contractor's letter and pledge that can be a piece of that conversation that's been happening. And then of course, with the Lead Materials Technical Advisory Group, there is always opportunity to find more that contractors can do. So just a couple quick challenges. I'm running out of my time here. The goal obviously on projects is to finish on schedule, within budget, meet building codes, plans, specs, and often sustainability can be at odds with those goals. So these are some of the common places where we need to really defend materials choices, and a contractor has an opportunity to do that. Move on to the next slide here. So what does work is when we have a champion architect or owner, early collaboration, revisiting the general specs, engagement in the field. It's really important before putting something in a spec that there's conversations happening about the durability of that product, about whether it's a product that's familiar, that's comfortable, clear communication about project goals, and that has to be across the board. It has to be pre-bid, it has to be communicated that there's healthier material goals on a project, so the pricing comes in correct. It has to be in the documents, it has to be in the contract language, it has to be in the kickoff meetings. And so really throughout, there has to be a reminder that a project is seeking to use healthier materials. And then that's, again, the subcontractor training engagement is a big piece of that. And so this is the last slide here. These are first steps, next steps. So depending on what your role is, these are ways that you can get started or continue this work. A lot of it related to the last slide. So for the GC, it's reviewing the documents, understanding them, communicating them out to everyone that is a part of that project team and coming onto that project site, and then to value engineer and substitute wisely. I mentioned the sustainable construction leaders, contractors commitment. The idea with that is that we'll continue with that effort and develop tools to support it. So potentially decision frameworks, other things that can be used during value engineering is something that's on the table to be created. And then for architects, it's specify it and only spec products that will meet project requirements, put language in about the process for substitutions. And for manufacturers, this is start the process in terms of knowing what's in your products, create clear documentation, accessible documentation, and then have a dedicated contact that deals specifically with this so that the answers are easy to get. And I call 1-800 numbers every single day to try and get information, and it is a real challenge. And so that is my presentation for today. I'm happy to take questions now or at the end, whatever the preference is.
Yeah, folks who are attending, if you have some questions, you can type them into the chat, and maybe we'll go through everybody, and we'll do questions at the end. So if you have questions for a panelist in particular, you can write like for Emily, and we'll address them. But let's go through everybody and then see if there are common questions that folks have. And if you do have a question, feel free to type them into the chat there, and we'll get to them as we proceed. Let's see here. Joshua, you're up. Let's talk.
All right. Thank you, Ren.
Yeah, before you start, can you tell us a little bit about like a 30-second bio, who you are, your favorite dog? I'm just kidding. Don't do that. But like, what is your role? How did you get there? And what do you do currently?
Of course. My name is Joshua Swake. I'm a project manager at Perlo Construction. Prior to being in construction, I was on the design side in transportation engineering, actually. Educational background, my bachelor's and my master's in civil engineering from Oregon State. Like I said, just moved through design and into construction, and watching things being built from the ground up after being put on paper was kind of where I found that I enjoy the work the most. So that's where I'm at now. And working through my third year now at Perlo Construction and taking on as many of these unique projects as I possibly can, as it's interesting and it's fun to work through. It's not the status quo of construction of just moving through the process. It's a lot more difficult and rigorous with these sustainability initiatives and projects. So the first of my endeavors on that road was for Malum Architects in doing their Portland office tenant improvement. In working with Malum, they're leaders in sustainable design and tireless advocates of material transparency. I have listed there their active memberships that they're participating in. Their new office is in Southeast Portland in the district called the Custom Blocks. It's just off of Southeast Madison. Their office space is approximately 7,500 square feet. Upon completion of the project, we were the first LBC Pedal certified project in the city of Portland, the second in the state. We're the fifth overall LBC certified project in the state, and then 48th in the United States, 57th in the world. So something very, something that we are all very proud of as a team, both at Perlo and at Malum. We can go to the next slide. So in achievement of the certification, and especially on the materials side, we used over 350 unique products. We were able to achieve a net zero embodied carbon emissions, of course, using a 50-year whole building life assessment. Over 94% of all of our construction waste was diverted from the landfill, with 100% of all metal, paper, cardboard, soil, carpet, and insulation being diverted. 100% of the wood that was used on the project was either FSC certified or salvaged, and nearly all of it was sourced from within the state of Oregon. We used 32 declare label products, which constituted about 38% of the material when measured by cost. 50% of all of our materials were sourced from within 500 kilometers of our project site. Over a dozen of these materials were unique salvaged products, such as some wood from Fort Vancouver here in Washington, even getting as creative as using parts of a screen door from one of our carpenters' houses to implement in the project. All of our products were screened for VOC emissions compliance to promote indoor air quality. As Emily was just discussing, it is important to protect our frontline guys and, of course, to protect Malem's workers who would be in the space. And to my knowledge, we are the first LBC project to utilize the red to green material tracking database software as a standalone team. In this graphic here on the bottom right-hand corner, it shows the different tiers of certification that can be achieved through the LBC. I don't know if you all can see it very well, but the pedal is the second most rigorous certification that you can apply for, with the living building itself being number one. Next slide. So with material transparency in the materials pedal itself, there's a lot of documentation that is required. I've kind of gone through what we used here as sources and the avenues that you can take to achieve those requirements. The graphic here is the material tracking table that the ILFI provides to you on their website. To fulfill this requirement, we need supporting data for red list and VOC compliance. This can be achieved through LBC compliant or red list free declare labels, an HPD with full disclosure, a complete MDS with all ingredients up 100% disclosure there, the global harmonized system safety data sheet, or a complete manufacturer supplied ingredients list. If none of those are attainable, you can still use products through route of due diligence, which is, again, an exhaustive effort of going through possible substitutions. If there's nothing there, then what they ask you to do is education and advocacy. So informing the manufacturer of the Living Building Challenge, what they're trying to achieve, what you're trying to achieve, and then advocating for material transparency. So that's something that myself and Jay Hindmarsh from Malem Architects spent a lot of time doing on this project. Resources that were key in getting all this accomplished was, of course, the ILFI website itself, their database, red to green, and the Declare web base as well. We go to the next slide. So in my personal experience with all of this, the materials pedal itself, while widely acknowledged to be the most difficult LBC pedal, I found also the most entertaining, as it took a lot of effort to achieve this, and adding kind of to the complexities of it or the rigor of it, we had a very unique team in that Malem leased the space with their vision and idea of accomplishing and building an LBC certified project. However, unlike most architects, they did not get an opportunity to interview their contractor, as Perlo was already under contract with the building owner. So we were kind of put together as a team and asked to make it work. Luckily, we were all able to bond very quickly. Malem articulated their goals and their vision of what they saw the space being, and us at Perlo, with our tireless devotion to our, achieving the best possible outcome for our clients as well as our projects, dove in headfirst, very willing and excited to get into it. The material vetting was something that was a lot more intense and time consuming than we had anticipated. It required a lot of, as I said, for education and advocacy, with the Living Building Challenge kind of moving from the East Coast to the West Coast. There aren't a lot of people out here who knew what it was or what we were trying to do, or even after providing documentation on it, fully understood the extent to which you need to go to achieve these goals. So educating our subs, calling manufacturers, asking for MSDS, asking for HPDs, letting them know that the amount or the disclosure that's on their documentation isn't necessarily all there at all times. For instance, if you have an MSDS with a range on it, you have to take the lowest end of that range. So while the highest end of the range may cover 100% of their ingredients, when you're documenting, you can only take the lowest percentage. And so it was short 99% of the time. So then you have to have them fill out a manufacturer inventory form. So getting through that actually proved to be quite a challenge and could be frustrating at times. Persevering and sticking with it was something that we as a team had to do together, which was exhausting at times, but kind of fun to work through. Dealing with all of this, the ILFI was key in everything. They have great resources, including their red to green database, which has a list of materials that have been previously used on projects that have been vetted and approved. It also has contacts at companies that you can reach out to if you need any further information. And then if you find it appropriate, once you have established your relationship with these contacts, you can ask them for other contacts, other companies. I found that to be hugely beneficial in procuring all the necessary documentation for our materials. And then one of the other complications in all of this, while educating the subs, was monitoring compliance on site. So while you're communicating with another project manager at a firm, everything may be understood over the phone, but it's not necessarily information that leaks down to boots on the ground. So having that communication with my super and having him monitor the subcontractors, carpenters on site, making sure there aren't any mistakes made, making sure that they aren't taking an easy way out when materials run short and they're substituting something in without permission was a challenge on its own, but again, something that we found a lot of fun in, and it just makes your day a little more interesting with having a lot more attention to detail in that. My advice to anybody who is tackling this, as I'm sure Adam will speak to next as he's in the middle of it, is making sure your team is solid, that open communication back and forth, the explanation, as Emily touched on earlier, of your visions, your expectations, your specifications, the process for submitting your materials, the process for substituting is all hugely instrumental in in achieving your end goal of an LBC certified project. In that, your pre-con time is huge. Material vetting is very time consuming, and even there are times you'll find something that has a declare label, you think it's an easy way out, you forget to check the expiration date, it expires, and some of the companies don't choose to renew it. So then you have to do a completely new substitution process and you start from scratch. And that can be frustrating and time consuming, so make sure you're planning for that. Communication, again, is key. Having that open dialogue with your team, making sure you're communicating expectations from top to bottom and reinforcing that every day. And then your attitude towards the project. Excuse me. Making sure that you are being an optimist, making sure that you're persevering, making sure that you're all on the same page, and just having the attitude of we can get through this, we can do this, we can do this together, is hugely instrumental in accomplishing your goals. And so I know that was kind of a quick rundown of what we went through there. If you'd like to know more about the space, Malum is conducting their own virtual tour Wednesday the 21st at 9 a.m. So be sure to tune into that. I thank you for your time, and we can move on to Adam.
Awesome, thanks. So Adam, same question to you. Can you give us a 30-second rundown of the who, what, when, where, why of Adam?
Yeah, it's on the second slide, or you go one more. That's my thank you. I do want to say thank you for Terry for inviting me, and Ren, for doing an amazing job moderating. I also want to thank Emily and Josh for going first. and for sharing your stories. And I also want to thank the audience for supporting us. Without you guys, we'd just be talking to ourselves. So thank you guys all for being here and be part of the cause and the movement. Yeah, so a little bit about me real quick. My name is Adam Klaba. I work for Walsh Construction. I've been a general contractor for about 19 years, and most of that has been focused on sustainable practices. And I'm very fortunate and very honored to be part of the PAU Living Building Project, which is the first full living building here in the city. And I'm the sustainability coordinator for that job, so that's all I really focus on. And these other points are just more about like how sustainability has kind of like infected my life. My wife is a project director for sustainability. And so there's a lot of support from home. That's really important. And then we're also homeowners. You know, we live in Southeast Portland, and this summer I've been working on building a certified backyard habitat, and I have dreams of doing a passive house retrofit someday. And then this little shot down here is a shot of a Earthship project I was fortunate enough to be part of last year for the Caliu Hotel down in Uruguay. I've got a whole nother presentation on that. It takes like an hour. So if you got questions, my contact information is at the end. And the last few things I'll say about myself is I'm a big fan of like holistic approaches like Project Drawdown. I'm a values-based investor, and I'm also on the sustainability committee for Walsh. So is that 30 seconds?
Yeah,
Right,
you got it.
slide. Cool. All right, so just a rundown of the pedals. It's kind of interesting to see Josh's take on what he's been doing for the materials pedal and how that kind of plays in with the living building overall, because the living building projects include 7 pedals, which you can see here: place, water, energy, materials, health and happiness, etc. And obviously today we're only just talking about the materials. So next slide. So within those 7 pedals, there's 20 imperatives. And this kind of breaks down, you know, with a little bit more detail about, you know, what the project is really all about. And they're all really mandatory. If you're doing a living building, it's pretty much pass fail. You have to make all of these happen one way or the other. And it's a performance-based standard. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of pressure, but there's a lot of commitment by, you know, having a really strong team as well. So that makes a really big difference. So we're mostly just going to talk about the materials section of that. And when it comes to, you know, being a general contractor, and I'm sure Josh can relate, is that when it comes to like the imperatives that we focused on, if you go to the next slide, of all these 20 imperatives, the red list is really the number one that we focus on. I mean, as far as like resources and what we've done to just make sure that we are in full compliance, we have to basically ensure, and for people who aren't familiar with the red list basically is, it represents ingredients that have been deemed harmful to human or environmental health. So we're doing everything we can to just not have them in any of the products that we use on the job. Now we also touch other imperatives as well, and I'm showing like a shrinking scale of maybe how much like time our team you know, devotes to these imperatives. But we have a materials conservation management plan, which I'm sure Josh wrote as well, for the net positive waste imperative. There's a responsible industry imperative for FSC lumber, which Josh also spoke about, and then, you know, we also are involved with the healthy interior environment and the living economy sourcing. The last one is about, you know, regional materials. But for this one, I'm just going to talk about just how we vet materials for the red list. So next slide, please. So this is just a snapshot, and it looks like Josh is using a similar program as well. This is a snapshot from our Red to Green software. And the reason I'm showing this is just because I'm trying to highlight the importance of just having some kind of material vetting system to be able to track all the products that you're going to use on your job. And when you log into our system, this is kind of like the welcome page. And from here you can, if you click on the list, you can't do it here because it's not live, it's just a snapshot. But just for an example, the list will show you the all the products that are on our job, and then the library will show you all the products that are used in all projects that are related to Red to Green. So there's a variety of different resources here. But if you go to the next slide, you can see what it looks like on our project. So this is just a snapshot from the top. This is what red to green looks like when you start to take a look at like our products specifically, and it kind of starts, from the top, for, concrete, but it's got, I don't know if you can see this, is really small, but we've got 185 different specifications and over 1,800 products that we're managing. So it is a pretty significant effort. And then in order to take a look at any given product, if you go to, I think it's on the next slide, just an example, if you want to look at the detail about, these are the snapshot of the glue laminated wood beams. When you click on any given product type, you can see there's a lot of different tabs in there that have a lot of detailed information about the product itself. And this is a total rabbit hole. We could talk for hours just on this, but just want to give everyone kind of an example of within the software, like how detailed the information needs to be and what the research team is looking at when it comes to considering approving a product. So here you can see in the ingredients tab, all the different things that have been identified as part of the glue laminated wood beams that the research team needs to be aware of before they can say this is something we can use or that we can't, or that we need an exception to, or what have you. So anyway, that's the software, and that's the kind of the basics of the vetting system that we're using on PAE. And it sounds like Josh used a similar program on his project as well. Next slide. Okay, great. So this is once you get past the material vetting stage, and then you tie that in with your submittals that get approved through the design team. What's also really important is that you have a check-in process. And what's interesting about this is that it wasn't something that anyone ever really explained to us, like, hey, you need to do this. But it kind of just became apparent that, like, we don't know how we're going to be able to confirm that all the work that we do up front to basically make sure that there's, compliant products that are available that we're going to use. Once they arrive on site, we got to make sure that those match. Because again, it's a performance-based standard. If we have stuff showing up that's not right, or if we install something that is wasn't approved by mistake, it could be catastrophic for the project. So what we have is a check-in process. And here you can see this is a shot of Sean Geddes, one of our project engineers, going up to the truck that has the glue lam beams on it. He's literally going over there to double check the bill of lading, and then he's got an iPad in hand, and he'll literally see like our red to green approvals, and then say like, okay, yes, this is okay. And then he'll allow it on the job. Now, if he sees something that's suspect, he's gonna call someone like myself or someone on the team. He's gonna flag it and say, no bueno, like, we have to set this aside because it's suspect. We may not be able to use it on this job. So for future teams, I definitely recommend, you guys have some kind of check-in process. Because someone hasn't told you to do it, please consider it anyway, because I don't know how else we would really understand whether we're using the right stuff on the job or not. So. Anyway, that's it. So next slide. So yeah, some of the keys to success. And Josh, you had some really great takeaways as well. Engaging the trades as early as possible, really critical. Having some kind of pre-con effort to vet as much as you can ahead of time makes a really big difference. Definitely make sure that they submit the products they want to use. Don't try to be so laser focused to just find compliant materials. The more we can submit into the library is going to help expand supply chain supply chain engagement, and it's going to be better for the cause overall. So just try to, and plus the products that the trades want to use, you want to try to get things approved that they're already familiar with, so that they can feel comfortable with and kind of stand behind them. You don't want to be introducing something to them that they're not entirely comfortable with and can't necessarily wrap their heads around or feel good about. So. And then along the way, you want to make sure that the manufacturer contact information is connected with the research team. That can be an issue as well. The research team can be reaching out to the manufacturers and no one's picking up the phone, no one's answering emails. You need to have someone who's emotionally invested in the job, who's providing the ingredient disclosure we need for approvals. And then beyond that, I'm sure Josh has gone through this as well. You need a plan B, you need a plan C, because there aren't going to be straightforward approvals for a lot of the stuff you're going to use. You need to consider alternate options for like unknown and non-compliant products. And then you need plan C for things when the alternates don't work out or there's not available on the market. You need to be able to write letters to document your good faith effort to be able to satisfy the LBC. And bottom line, you just got to become a champion for the process, and just do whatever it takes, within the confines of the ILFI. So, and there's more to it than that, but that's all I can get on one slide. Okay, and then this one, I created this one just because there was a question about whether materials transparency is something that has been new to us at Walsh Construction. And just to give you a little bit of a background, something that we've done for years and years and years is we've had a building performance department, which is kind of unique in my opinion. I've worked for 3 other general contractors, and this is the only one that's ever done this. But we have what's called like a QA/QC team that really focuses on the Division 7 materials. We have licensed architects on staff. We have highly trained field personnel that we call skin doctors that focus on just the building envelope. And those guys really engage the manufacturers, you know, on especially every ground up job, just to make sure that we know that the products that we buy and the materials that we put into the building are going to perform. So there's a lot of mock-ups, there's a lot of performance testing, a lot of manufacturer engagement. It's not the same as, you know, vetting through the red list, but we do have a lot of really skilled folks that are very aware of the materials that go in the building, as well as ingredients and what the chemistry behind them that makes them perform or not perform. So it's a unique perspective, but it's something we've delved into a little bit in the past. So next slide, please. Okay, cool. It looks like I'm doing okay on time. I was worried I was gonna run over, but no, what I want to say is I wanted to have this slide be about not something much about us, but about you guys, the audience, everyone who's watching this, is that if you think that supply chain engagement is important, you don't need to be on a living building or even on a construction project to get involved. I guess I just wanted to remind everybody that there's a tremendous amount of power behind purchasing, and that every time you buy something, you're voting. You're basically saying, yes, I approve with this product. Please make more of them. I believe in what you're doing. Whether you say something or not, when you financially contribute to something, you're saying like, hey, this is a good idea and this is what I want to see in the future of our world. So something that, you know, I hope everyone takes away from today is, you know, are your purchases supporting your values? And if they're not, you know, don't be afraid to speak up and say something, because, you know, you might not think people are listening, but you might not necessarily know for sure until you have a chance to find the right audience. And then also understand the value of data as a commodity. I mean, like I'm hearing that like data is more a greater traded commodity compared to like oil in the past few years. I mean, it's like there's a lot of companies that are spending a lot of resources to find out what we want as consumers. So I mean, like having this information to give back to them is priceless. And then I'd say consider giving yourself a reminder. For myself, I don't know if you guys can see me on this small screen, but I use my wallet. This is made by Alchemy Goods, and it's made by recycled bicycle tires. So what I know, every time I open this thing, I can see like, oh, this is something that I diverted from the landfill, and it's made out of recycled materials. And on top of that, nothing had to die in order to make this thing. So I can't help but get away from it every day. You know, you know, this is something that needs to remind me, like every time I open my wallet, I got to think like, okay, is this something I believe in? Okay, and then next slide, I may be towards the end here. Oh yeah, so lastly, just on the project itself, for more information or anything else I talked about today, here's my email, my cell phone, if you guys have questions. And I also want to say job site tours are available if you guys want to come check out the PAE building. If you're here in June, you could walk around our 71,000 gallon cistern that you can see everybody in here now. You can't do it now because it's all covered up and it's a hazardous space. But we just delivered, you know, the Blue Lamb this week. CLT is going to be going up soon. So if you guys are interested in a tour, just send me an email and we'll get you guys set up. So anyway, that's it. 8:42. I'm doing good.
Awesome. I love it. Okay. So let's get into it. I want to start with one sort of general question for all of you. What is something that designers can do to make your life easier? / what is something you wish designers knew when it came to product and material transparency that sort of affects your job? As it looks like there's a ton of things, but like, what is something designers can do to either make your life easier or you wish that they kept in mind during their design process, just to kick us off? And I'll start with Emily.
Sure. I mean, I guess it's just to not copy and paste specs and to dust them off every time and make sure that they're relevant to their project and that they're clear. If there are opportunities for healthier materials and or healthier material goals on the project, I think would be the biggest thing. I mean, often we see specs that come through that have legacy things related to lead. It's not even a lead job. And so, yeah, just to make sure that those are really specific to the project.
Awesome. Joshua, what about you?
I'd have to echo what Emily's saying. Those specifications go a long way in helping us procure the right materials and making sure that we're able to get that documentation. A lot of the times, especially working with Malin, they put in a lot of the legwork prior to releasing their specs. So they knew which materials had declare labels. They knew which ones had full HPD or cradle to cradle or anything like that. So if there are architects, designers out there who want to see this end goal achieved, putting in a little work yourself goes a long way. Because, you know, like Adam and I were saying, it's hard to express how difficult the materials pedal is in 10 minutes. But it definitely takes a team to get it done. And the more research or legwork you can put in, and the more clear you can communicate that, the easier it's going to go for everybody.
Got it. And Adam, you have anything to add?
Well, yeah, I definitely want to reinforce what Emily and Josh just said, but I guess I also want to add is that what's helped us on the PAE project, that the design team was really forward thinking, is that they made a lot of the specifications really performance based, and they didn't always narrow us down in regards to using any given product, because they knew that the markets were always going to be constantly changing. So by making it clear like how we needed to perform versus saying like, hey, you're going to use these particular manufacturers, allowed us to be able to kind of engage the market in a more wide open fashion. But there's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because then, you know, some trades will also say like, well, how come I don't know what I'm supposed to use? I'm like, and that's where we have to come back and say like, look, this is a nascent technology, a nascent movement. You guys have to realize that, you know, being on the leading edge means that we do a little bit more homework, unfortunately. So it's, yeah, to echo what Josh is saying, the materials pedal is, I don't know, it's one of the more challenging ones. And I think that's also why in order to get pedal certified, it's like you got to do energy, water, or materials. And I think most people pick energy or water first.
Yeah. We do have a question from the chat, which is, can you please list any places you remember to divert waste? And what about product packaging? So sort of getting into that, like, how do you divert all of this waste and how do you track it? And again, we'll just go in the order that you spoke in. So Emily, how about you go first?
Yeah, I mean, the opportunities are really regional. You know, recycling markets, I think, vary quite a bit. So this may be a question for the folks that are actually in the Portland area. But what we do is just keep in touch with our recyclers on what they are accepting and not, and you know, what's been on with markets, because things change pretty frequently. So we source separate as much as we can in our jobs and have an internal goal of 80% waste diversion. But that is not always possible. And in particular, in our market, a lot of our facilities are getting RCI certified. And so their diversion rates are changing because there's more transparency. And also, again, there are fewer opportunities for them to recycle materials given changes in the market that happened pre-COVID, but now with COVID, it's even a little bit more difficult. And so it's changing. It's just because it worked in the last job does not mean it's going to work on this job. Just because we were able to, you know, recycle carpet or a certain type of cardboard on a project does not mean it will happen again. Does not mean it will happen in Portland if it happened here in the Bay Area. So,
yeah, awesome, Joshua.
Adam spoke to this a little bit in his presentation, but the material conservation management plan is huge. Engaging your waste recycler right off the bat, letting him know your expectations, him or her, excuse me, writing that out with them, making sure that they fully understand, you know, we have to hit these goals every single time you pick up a load. And it comes down to even providing multiple dumpsters. So you're gonna have a general waste, you're gonna have recycling, you're gonna have food compost. I mean, all of it has to be covered there on site. You have to then make a plan with them, pass that along to your subs, make sure that they're on board. I even went to our project site with my superintendent and put on a little 15-minute training seminar. This is where our recycling areas are. This is what is allowed to go in here. This is what's allowed to go in here, et cetera. And then from there, it's, making sure that you're in communication with your recycler every day or every pickup. What did it weigh? Where did you take it? What were the weights? Get the tickets for me, please. I need to know all that stuff. And then you document it, make sure it's matching up to your MCMP. And then you just kind of got to make sure that you're following that throughout the entire process.
Adam, anything to add?
No, Josh is actually absolutely correct on the MCMP, and having some effective site orientation makes a really big difference in regards to how you want to organize materials or and tracking them on the site. But I think the only thing I'd like to add is it's been very valuable for us to be able to go engage all the different waste haulers or materials haulers that we considered at the beginning of the project, and visiting their facilities and seeing firsthand exactly how, like, what materials they accept, because the plastics recycling industry with what's going on with China over the past couple of years has changed, and that gives us perspective of what kinds of things that can be recycled or repurposed and what aren't. Learning more about alternative daily cover, because that isn't always really straightforward, as well as like how they calculate their different material quantities. I feel like there's a dirty little secret out there in regards to how the ILFI expects you to like separate things out based on a percentage and based on weights, but then it all comes in when it's a commingled box that arrives at a facility, it gets weighed once. And if you want to know like how they figure out the percentages along the way, you got to ask them directly, and I'll let them speak to that. But we found out what the industry does for every hauler that we know of here in town, and we made it clear within our plan exactly what we're going to do, so that we're very transparent about how we're tracking all of these goals. And so I think we're all everyone's in compliance, but it does kind of wake you up in regards to how to achieve a compliance and how realistic that is compared to how the LBC defines those goals.
Right. We did have a question for Emily, for the contractors who are on board or are listening. Can you go a little deeper into a little deeper detail on the how contractors are working on their materials pledge, and how can other GCs or subs get involved?
Sure. So the contractors commitment that we are putting together through the Sustainable Construction Leaders will be launched right around Green Build. So mid-November is the time frame for that. And it's something that is intended to, any GC can sign on to it and start to use it as a resource and as a guidepost in those different areas that I mentioned. And then there is a membership for Sustainable Construction Leaders, and it's envisioned in the future some of the tools and supporting materials that go along with that will be available to members, but the best practices and the commitment and the work that's been done by about 30 of us now, 30 different GCs, is available to everyone in industry. So that's something that will be coming soon through Building Green. And another piece I mentioned was the Contractors Pledge, and we are currently looking for a home for that. So the LP50 is with ILFI, and then the designers piece of it is now with AIA. We're looking for a similar home for that and organization to sort of push that out for us. That should also be coming soon, but I'm happy to, who wants to contact me, share details when I know them.
Awesome. I have a question that I know we hear from our clients every day. How does material transparency affect pricing and the timing of a project? And Emily, I guess I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said this, it's got to be clear up front when the project is going to bid. And so that's often not the case. And the timing of our project, I don't think should be significantly impacted. And we certainly haven't seen that be an issue. When timing becomes an issue, then there typically is a substitution, and that's where it's important to find a comparable product that still meets those goals and not just keep the project moving.
Great. Joshua?
Yeah, so with us, I found typically in budgeting for the project, the materials cost was a little bit higher, and the lead times were a little bit longer. but well worth it in the end. And to be honest, the costs weren't that much higher and the lead times weren't that much longer. It was more of the vetting process for us that was the lengthy aspect of it. But yeah, I'd say, it may be a slight increase in cost, but it's worth it in the end.
That's amazing. Adam, I saw you nodding your head there.
Yeah, I'll second everything that Josh just said. And also, having a good pre-con effort up front really makes a big difference. So you guys, the team knows what to expect when it comes to budgeting. Kind of minimize surprises along the way. But yeah, like Josh, we haven't had too many, significant surprises in regards to like cost. And I think it's because of the planning that was done up front. It doesn't mean that there aren't threats and there aren't risks along the way as substitutions, become necessary, last minute. But right now, I mean, we're 6 months into construction, and I'm not aware of any really sizable change orders that are related to the materials selection.
That's great.
And I'm crossing my fingers it'll stay that way.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like all the pre-planning that you do and sort of like tightening those specs and having all those conversations as a project team sort of minimizes the potential impact of cost and timing because you've done all this pre-planning basically. Yeah. And then I want to sort of close with a question sort of more generally. I find that a lot of designers, clients, the materials transparency sort of sits within a larger conversation of sort of transparency in this industry as a whole. And so we've gotten some questions about are there other parts of the job that are embracing more transparent practices and sort of socially equitable practices in terms of how you run the job site or how you run your project teams? Like how does material transparency sort of fit within a larger theme of making healthier spaces and healthy in sort of the like socially sustainable and healthy for human psyche and human health? How does it fit within that larger project or larger theme within your own project team? So I'll start with Emily again.
Maybe a silver lining of the pandemic that I think that we are thinking a lot more about the materials that we surround ourselves in and having healthy job sites and workplaces. That's a conversation that is happening sort of across the board now, whereas before it was the sustainability team showing up being like, hey. But I think there's a lot more emphasis on it now from our safety teams and just from a personal need to know or want to know what kind of conditions you're working in every day. And so I do think that that is something beneficial that has come out of this, is that we'll be able to have these conversations and have them more frequently with a larger group of people engaged in our project.
Great. That's awesome. Joshua, how about you?
I've found that moving towards this new, or not, I guess not new, but kind of newer to the West Coast sustainability, a lot of our workers, and I know all of the employees at Mainland are all extremely happy because they take a personal pride in knowing that they've accomplished this, but they're in a safe space with the VOC emission requirements and making sure that you're tracking that. They know that they're not inhaling any terrible fumes for them. They know that everything that's inside their space, materials-wise, was harvested responsibly and either salvaged, reused, whatever the case may be. And so, I mean, they're happy, and they're happy to go to work. They're happy with the space that they're in. They take personal pride in that achievement of their goals and that personal space. And then it's no longer talking a talk. You're now walking a walk. So we can sit up here on a panel and say all of these things all the time, but if you're not actually out there doing it, then what kind of weight are you actually carrying? And I think that goes a long way for both contractors, architects, and the overall space and the people who are occupying that space.
That's great. Adam?
There we go. I don't know if I've got a really great answer for this question. I do know that, I think the culture of our project is pretty different just because of the type of project it is, but I kind of feel like seeds are still kind of being planted in regards to like the overall effect that this type of building approach has. I honestly don't know like how everyone feels about some of the VOCs and whatnot. I think it might also be because we're not enclosed yet. Like we've just got the concrete tower, poured out. We got a lot of rebar, but I do appreciate the question because I think it's something that I want to think about in the months to come in regards to like how valuable is it to the different trades that are on site to know that there's likely that there is a reduction in the amount of harmful chemicals that they could be exposed to. So I know I appreciate the question, even though I don't know if I can give a really good answer.
Oh, that's great. So it looks like we have 2 minutes left. So I will just, if there are any last questions you have, send them into the chat. And in the meantime, what I'm hearing most is keep asking. The designers should keep pushing for this. They should keep talking to manufacturers about this, and that will in turn make your lives easier as contractors to get those products. And so sometimes it can feel like feels like we're screaming into a void a little bit and you don't know what the end goal is, but it sounds like it is making a huge impact in this process, not only for the users of a space, but for the folks who are making those spaces. And so we should just keep up the good work and keep pushing forward and keep advocating for this. Like Adam mentioned, be advocates. Well, all of you mentioned, we should all be advocates for this and contribute to that sort of data collection of our wants and desires. And manufacturers are listening, especially these days. They really want to know what designers want, what clients want. And if we keep asking for it, they will keep doing it. So it doesn't look like we have any other questions. So I want to thank all of our panelists. Your insights were incredible. It's so lovely to hear from the folks who make our projects into real life. So thank you so much. And I hope we can continue to work together in the future. So thank you everyone for attending. Thank you to Sustainable Building Week. And we'll see you at some more events. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll see ya. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.